Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of the Mystic Space podcast. So, today we are going to be talking all about breaking generational trauma. I've noticed a lot of people talking about breaking generational trauma and asking a lot of questions about it as well, like what is it and how do you do it? So, I'm going to break it down. First of all, let's start off with what is trauma? A lot of people think that trauma has to be something very big in your life, like, say, a sexual assault or a death or something like that, which, of course, those are definitely traumas in your life. But traumas can also be very small things that a lot of the times we don't even recognize was a part of our trauma. So, one way that I could explain it is when you hurt yourself physically, right? That's called trauma to your body. So, you get into a car accident or you hit yourself or something, right? That is called trauma to your physical body, and your body reacts some sort of way to that trauma, whether it swells, whether it bruises, whatever it does. That's a reaction to the trauma. But the trauma is the impact it had on your body. The experience had an impact on your body. Now, trauma for our brain is basically the same thing. It's an experience that we've gone through that created trauma to our brain. So, say if you lost somebody at a very young age, that would have been traumatic to your brain. It's the way that your brain reacts to an experience. And trauma to our brain, it alters the way we think, the way we behave, the way we believe in ourselves, or what we believe in general. That's where things like abandonment issues can come into, right? So, say if you were abandoned by a parent or something when you were very young, you might have those abandonment issues so that later in your future, even as an adult, even if you think you've moved on from it and you're over it, if something small like that happens where you feel abandoned, it might trigger those wounds. I love explaining that our brain is basically like a machine. It's a machine that holds information, and it's also a machine that gets programmed or conditioned a certain way. Whether that's, conditions because of external world, whether society, impacted you in some sort of way or influenced you, whether your parents influenced you, or whether it was trauma or experiences that happened to you that shaped who you are. That all turned into programs into your brain. And you may now think, feel, and act a certain way because of the programs in your brain. Now, a lot of people that I've spoken to say, oh, I didn't have that bad of a childhood. I wasn't very traumatic. I'm fine, and things like that. And again, that's because a lot of people think that trauma are big incidences in your life, which again, of course, they are. But something as simple as the cry out method has been proven now to cause trauma to the brain because a baby is only just crying out for, somebody to care for them, whether it's because they're hungry or they're tired or whatever it is, right? That's just the only way that they know how to communicate with the external world. And if they are not getting their needs met, which is kind of like a underlying issue with why things cause us trauma, because we as humans have certain needs. And if those needs are not getting met, then a lot of the times that will cause us trauma. So if we're not getting shown affection, if we're not getting shown the love we need and the respect we need and things like that from like mostly our parents, because it's kind of starts from our parents, then that will cause trauma in us. So a baby crying out to their mum, trying to get their attention, trying to be comforted, after a while, that does cause trauma to that baby. So I'm sure most of you have heard the saying that a woman finds, and this is only obviously if you are a straight couple, because obviously this can apply for anybody, but for the most part, we've heard that a woman finds somebody that's like their father in a man, and a man finds somebody that's like their mother in a woman. And I don't think that it's always like the opposite. Like, as a woman, I don't think you're always looking for traits in your father. And of course, this is all subconscious. If you have a great relationship with your parents, then this might not apply to you. You might not really get it. But if you don't have a great relationship with your parents and you would be disappointed if you turned out anything like them or you wouldn't want a partner like them, then the reason why we do end up attracting these people are subconscious because it is familiar to us. It's what we believed was love as a child, and now that's what we look for in other people, even if it is unconscious. So, we've all heard something along the lines of this, and not a lot of us question why that is. Why do we attract partners that we might not necessarily even want, that we're not happy with, or that might resemble something in our parents that we actually don't like? Well, first of all, you need to understand that children are like sponges. So they learn everything from their surroundings. Even if you're trying to teach them something different, they learn by observing you. So you can tell them to eat eat their broccoli, but if they see you not liking broccoli and you eating other food, then they're not going to believe you all the time. They're not going to follow your example, I should say. Like if you tell a child to not eat cake because it's bad for you, but then they see you stuffing your face with cake, it goes against what they're getting taught and they don't understand. And they're learning more from the behaviors that you model for them, the way you show them, because that's the best way that children learn is usually by what is shown, by observing other people walk, observing people talk, observing people doing this. And that's when they learn the most, not necessarily by you just telling them, don't do this or do that. It's about them seeing it in action. And this usually goes beyond the surface level, the personality that we obtain from our environment and from learning from our parents and everything like that. It goes on so much more of a deeper level than, you just being bubbly or confident or maybe short tempered and angry. There's a lot of root issues that come with that. And usually that's because your parents or whoever else was around you have those issues themselves to begin with, and then they became a parent. And instead of learning how to deal with that, they have passed it on to you, even if it's completely subconscious, even if they don't intend to do it. Because we all know that most parents, obviously not every single parent out there is good and wants to be a good parent, but for the most part, most parents just are doing what they think is best. They're just doing what they think is right to do. They're just doing what they can with the tools that they were given as children, because a lot of the times we have to think about how our parents were also raised. And it does not excuse their behavior at all, but it's just to understand why they are the way they are. And doing that helps you understand, because it kind of starts with you, right? If you're short tempered or angry, like I was as an example, you question yourself and you ask yourself, why am I this way? Why am I this way? And you dive really fucking deep into yourself. And that's why doing a lot of this work, whether you want to call it shadow work or, you know, self love work or spiritual awakening, whatever journey it is where you're trying to discover who the fuck you actually are, you're waking up to the fact that maybe you haven't been who you really think you are. Maybe like you realize that the world around you is kind of like a lie, like a fake, and you're trying to figure out what the fuck is actually real. So when you're trying to figure out who you are, this is when you ask yourself all these questions and you ask yourself why you are the way you are. Because at the end of the day, like I said, it's just a program that's been put into your machine, into your brain, and that can always change. If you yourself were brought up in a toxic household, let's just say you didn't have the support and the love that you needed from your parents. Imagine you grew up in a household with parents who were emotionally healthy and who were able to give you what you needed and met your needs. You would probably be a completely different person than you are right now. Imagine instead of getting criticized by your parents, you were uplifted and supported by your parents. That would give you so much more confidence in your life and about who you are as well. You would have been given the space to be able to become whoever it is that you actually want to be, whoever it is that you actually are, rather than just being somebody that your parents or whoever tried to teach you to be. And you were trying to please them. You were trying to be smart and good at school or do this and do that and play this sport or play the piano or whatever it is that your parents really wanted you to do. But what is it that you want to do? Who is it that you want to be? Who are you without all of the traumas and all the experiences that happened in your life? And this is what generational trauma means. It means it has been passed on continuously. So your parents might have been very angry and short tempered, and their parents were probably short tempered and angry, and so on and so forth. And even if it's been passed down in different ways, because again, like I said, most parents, they're trying to do their best. They think what they're doing is the best way for them, right? They think what they're doing is best. And a lot of parents are only just basically doing another form of what their parents did. Even if they think they're doing better, or even if they're trying to do better, unless they actually really stop and do a lot of inner work, they will continually pass it down in some other way. As an example, a lot of parents, even my parents, Although my parents were physically abusive, mostly more to my brother and sister, unfortunately, not as much to me, but still was. And one of their arguments were that, their parents hit them all the time. And now they're just trying to do much better, right? Like they don't do it as much, or they don't do it the way that their parents did, because the way my grandparents did shit was fucked up. And again, I understand why my parents have a lot of trauma and why they are the way they are. Does not excuse it. But what I'm trying to say is a lot of parents will be like, oh, I don't hit my children because my parents hit me and I hated it. But then will continually yell at their children or something like that. So it's the same base emotion. That's what I'm trying to say is you need to go down to the root of it, because even though the physical surface level action might be a little bit different, maybe you're not physically hitting your children, but if you're still emotionally abusing them or still yelling at them, which is causing trauma, by the way. And I know a lot of people are probably so overhearing the word trauma. And this is why I say it's freaking important. It's just something that's really important to recognize that something as simple as yelling at a child will cause trauma to them. And that's not what a lot of parents want to hear. And I totally understand that, because it's hard to be a parent, which is one of the reasons why I'm choosing not to have kids, because it's something that would be extremely hard, and I would want to be completely aware of my actions so that I'm not passing it down, so that even though I'm doing better than my parents and I'm not hitting or I'm not yelling, I'm still not passing down any sort of trauma. I'm not passing down my hurt, because that's what it is, right? Hurt people hurt people. And because you were hurt a certain way by your parents or society or whatever, you end up hurting those that are more vulnerable than you, smaller. And it's not intentional. A lot of the times it's subconscious. Most of the time people don't even realize what they're doing. Most of the time people don't even realize that they're just being another version of their parents. Even if they think it's better, it's still a version of them. One thing people have to stop and recognize is how much impact you can truly have, especially on a child. Yes, on any other human being. You're like, people always say, your words can really hurt people, because people who are bullies, whether they're fucking children or not, because we all know that there's still adult bullies around. If you're a bully or if you say something mean, that impacts people. That impacts that person, that matters to that person. If you were to go up to somebody and say, you're fat and ugly, that would impact that person. Now, hopefully, if that person's an adult and they're, emotionally mature and they've done the work on themselves, if somebody calls them fat and ugly, then they would be able to understand that that person is just projecting their pain onto them, and they will not take it on with so much pain and hurt. They might not get affected by it. However, children don't have this understanding. That's why when you're yelling at your children, they don't understand, because they're looking at you as a parent, somebody that they love, somebody they're looking up to, somebody that is supposed to love and protect them and take care of them. And when you're taking out your frustrations and your anger on them, they don't understand, and they're not learning how to deal with their own emotions and their own anger and their own pain. Even if your children are driving you up the fucking wall and you're overstimulated because you're tired from work and you've done this and you've done that, and your child's just nagging or making a mess and they just spilt everything and everything like that, that is still not a reason for you to lash out. And I'm not shaming anybody who still does, because I know nobody's perfect. The point is, at least if you're going to react instead of respond, is to at least apologize. But the more you learn that you acting out in frustration or anything like that impacts them, it causes trauma to them, because they don't understand. They don't understand. And people need to realize that children are humans. They're just little humans, and they're just trying to figure out what the fuck this world is. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure out what to do, what to believe in, how to be, how to act, everything like that. They're learning all of that, and they're learning that from their parents. If their parents don't know how to regulate themselves, then how are they supposed to learn how to regulate themselves? If your parents are telling you to shut up, don't cry, then how are you supposed to know what to do with that emotion of sadness or anger? You're not. You're probably going to either suppress it, bottle it up, or unfortunately, take it out in a bad way, do something that's unhealthy. That's why children lash out. They end up bullying. They end up being physical, or, when they become teenagers, they might turn to drugs or like horrible things like that. And it doesn't always necessarily be like the worst case scenario. It doesn't mean that they need to turn to drugs, but, just teenagers that just end up not being their best selves because they don't know how to deal with their emotions because they were never taught and they were never shown. And that causes trauma to our brain. If we're not shown how to deal with our emotions and we're holding on to anger, right? Because we're not allowed to express it. Because if we express it, if we talk back to our parents or if we get angry or something, we're going to get in trouble. We're going to get smacked. We're going to hit. We're going to get disciplined in some sort of way. So then we hold it in within ourselves because we're afraid of expressing it. And holding in that emotion without being able to deal with it causes trauma to you because it impacts you. We need to be shown how to deal with our emotions and how to best regulate ourselves and how to be emotionally mature so that we understand that when we get bullied, when we go to primary school or high school, it has nothing to do with us. Our parents have empowered us that we are special, we are unique, we are worthy, we are loved, and people who, treat us anything but that are just projecting issues that they have within themselves. And the younger you can teach a child that, the better they're going to be in their life and as an adult. But the hardest thing for parents to teach their children that is that even if the parent themselves are disrespecting their child should not put up with that. So a parent yelling at their child is not okay. And they should teach their children that that is also not okay. But unfortunately, that's not the case. A lot of parents say, oh, this person, might be treating you bad because of this, but I can do whatever I want because I'm your parent. I'm just disciplining you because I want what's best for you, or I'm doing this because of this. And children just don't understand in this in the same way. People just need to understand that children are little humans and they're just learning. They're just observing this world and they're just trying to discover who they are and what the world is about. And they're learning things about their parents, and they're vulnerable and they're gullible in a sense, because that's why a lot of people still love their parents, even though they've been mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive to them, because they were taught that they have to. And that's really sad, because if anybody else treated you the way your parents had treated you, whether it was mental abuse, emotional abuse, or physical abuse, you probably would be really upset about it, as you should. If a stranger on the street came and hit you because they didn't like that you did something, it would be really wrong. Or if somebody put you down in some way just because they didn't like what you did and you overstimulated them and they yelled at you or they called you a name or something like that, then it would be wrong. And it is no different when your parents do it. Just because they're your parents does not mean they're entitled to treat you like shit. And I feel like that's what a lot of people don't understand. And I think that's why a lot of parents also, they kind of continue this trauma and this generational trauma because they were abused and made to feel very little as children, right? They were made to feel like they have no control. And now having children themselves, they feel like they have that control and that power over somebody else. So it kind of makes them feel good because now they can treat somebody else in the way that they were treated. I mean, a lot of parents, I'm sure you've probably heard someone say something like that. Oh, my parents made me do this, so I'm going to do the same to you. Oh, my parents did this. My parents were never affectionate to me, so I can't be affectionate to you, or whatever it is. This is what it means to have that generational trauma, that you're just basically being another reaction. You're just living in that loop. You're just being like your parents in some way. You're just being another version of your parents. And like I said, this generational trauma can go deep. It can go generations back, generations, like your great, 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 great fucking grandparents, the way they treated their kids and their kids and their kids, that all matters because somebody along the way did not stop. Somebody along the way did not say, this is not right. This is not okay. We should not be treating our children this way. And we should not be treating ourselves this way. I deserve so much more love and respect for myself. Even if you're not having children like me, doesn't mean that you shouldn't work on your generational trauma, because it's still important for yourself, for your own growth, so that you can learn that you are the way you are because of these experiences, and that you don't have to be those anymore. You don't have to be like that anymore. You don't have to be short tempered and angry all the time or whatever it is. That's something that you can change, but you have to become aware of it. You have to acknowledge where it is, where it came from, and that you want to change that as well. So that takes a lot of self awareness and accountability, which can be really hard for a lot of people that, are just living like unconsciously and just being a reaction to their environment, because they don't really stop to think for a moment and go, hey, am I doing this right? Like, should I be doing this? And why am I doing this? Does this actually make me feel good to yell at my children and send them off into the naughty corner? Why am I doing that? Is it actually beneficial to them or not? Like, really thinking about it. So if you're on the path and you're listening to this podcast, which clearly you are, if you're if you're here, I want to applaud you, because this journey is not easy. So, for you to even care to take the step to even start acknowledging and being aware of why it is the way that you are, why you are the way you are, whatever, and wanting to change that, that takes a lot of energy, and that takes a lot of self awareness. And I'm really fucking proud of everybody who's going on this journey, and everyone who's stopping these generational traumas. I'm seeing parents all the time these days making videos about it and talking about it and saying the cycle ends with me. And that means that they're not continuing that cycle. They've realized and they're going to stop it. There's going to be literally a break in their generation. Like, if you can imagine, like a tree of your family tree, and you're like going back and back, there's going to be a line of where that person is, because they've stopped it. They're like, I'm not going to be like this anymore. I'm changing. And it's not easy. It's not perfect. I'm not saying that, you're going to snap your fingers and everything's going to be all rainbows and butterflies, but it's that accountability, it's that awareness, and it's that wanting to grow. It's wanting to change to be better for yourself. And if you have children, for them, because they deserve it. They don't deserve to go through what you went through. And I know it sucks that you went through shit and you didn't deserve it. No. But passing it on is not fair either. So let's talk about breaking it. Let's talk about that line, and let's talk about that time where you go, I'm done and I'm not doing this anymore. First of all, like I said, it takes time. It's not necessarily always going to be a snap moment and you're going to be so much different than you were. It's still going to take time, because it's a emotional reaction that you have within your body, and you actually need to learn how to work through that. You need to release it as well. So, as an example, this is something that I see is so common in parents, or even just people. Even again, if you don't have children, it doesn't matter. If you see a child throwing a tantrum, getting mad and upset and crying and carrying on, and that upsets you and that triggers you, it's probably because you were never allowed to do that. So it takes time, and you're going to get triggered. Every single time your child has a tantrum, or you hear a child having a tantrum, initially you might feel your body having a reaction. You might feel yourself getting angry or tense or something and wanting to yell, wanting to stop it. And that's when you have to have that awareness and pause for a moment and slow down and understand why you're having the reaction that you're having currently, and how you want to choose to respond rather than react to that situation. What is actually going to be the most beneficial in this situation, and what do you care about the most? So if you're a parent and your child is having a tantrum because they're upset, instead of just trying to shut them down and shut them up, basically, because you can't handle hearing them crying, you should be coming from a place of love and compassion and trying to understand why the child is having the tantrum and trying to help them in whatever way. So, whether that's just, hugging them, or whether that's just giving them the space, or whether that's teaching them, certain tools that they can use when they're angry, as an example. Like, I've heard a lot of parents say, you know, safe hands, I think that they use as a term. So, like, how a lot of children at a certain age, they might get frustrated or something, and they tend to like hit their parents. obviously they're not trying to be a horrible child, or they're not lashing out and they're this horrible child. Like a lot of parents seem to make them out like, oh my God, my child's doing this. Oh my God, my child's like trying so hard to make me miserable. Like that's not true. They're just trying to learn, and they're just trying to see what they can do, because they're having these big emotions as such little people and they don't know what to do with it. So it is our job to help them through that and teach them things that they can do when they're feeling these certain emotions, and how to help them move through it as well. A lot of this also includes having boundaries and putting boundaries up for people around you, because if you're constantly being triggered by a lot of people in your old life who don't quite understand the move and the changes that you're trying to implement in your life, they're going to be holding you back, because they are still living in a completely different state of mind than you are. And they're not understanding all this change, and they don't understand because they don't have that awareness for themselves. And they are not capable of growing at that moment. I'm not saying that they never are, everybody's on their own journey. And some people say that some people will become aware in this lifetime and some people just won't. And that's just something that's out of our control. All you can do is what's best for you. And that includes putting boundaries up and not putting up with shit that makes you become the old version of yourself. That doesn't mean suppressing it or ignoring it, because when something comes up that triggers you, that's when you should work through it. That's when you should have that awareness and try to figure out what's going on. So if you want to change who you are, or at least who you thought you were, and you want to be a better person, or you want to be more aligned with who it is that you truly feel like you are, like for the most part, I think the most important thing you should do is ask yourself if this feels good. So when you're yelling at a child, or when you're getting triggered, or when you're reacting in some sort of way, whenever the thing comes up that's, upsetting you or triggering you, I think it's important to slow down and ask yourself, does this make me feel good? How do I want to be? Because if this doesn't make me feel good, what does make me feel good? Our bodies are our biggest indications to how we're feeling, right? Our emotions are our biggest indications to how we're feeling. If something's feeling good, then it's in alignment to us. It's what's meant to be for us. If something's not feeling good, then it's something that we want to change. It's something that's not meant for us. And as important as it is to put up the boundaries and to remove the toxic people out of your life and all of that, it's important to also choose people around you and choose what you surround yourself with, so that it is in alignment of who you want to be and where you want to go in your journey. Because unfortunately, not everybody that is on our path at the moment is meant to be with us for our entire journey. Unfortunately, everyone is just on their own pace, they're on their own journey, and they're not meant to go on the same journey as you. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes, even if you're not in alignment, it's totally okay, because you guys can respect each other, and maybe you don't trigger each other. Maybe you don't hold each other back. But for the most part, unfortunately, a lot of people from what I like to call your quote unquote old life, or the old version of you, they're going to hold you back because they are holding the version of you in their head that they know. So they've always known you to be the angry, short tempered type of person. And for them to change their mind of who you are, that takes a long time. And that has basically a long time of you having to prove it. Not that you ever need to prove it, but from them observing it from you. Yes, obviously some people can change and people are like, oh my God, wow, you've changed so much. But for the most part, a lot of people just hold that version of you that they have in their heads, and they're not willing to let that go because that's how they know you. So surround yourself with things that feel in alignment with you. Make friends with people who, if you're a parent, as an example, and you're wanting to be more like this. And I know there's a lot of people that use the words like gentle parenting and things like that, different parenting styles. But if that's something that's in alignment to you, that's something that feels good, follow pages of that, make friends with people that are like that, because it's going to be easier for you to be like that yourself. If you're trying to be a millionaire, you got to understand that you have to start thinking like them. You have to start hanging, not necessarily like you have to have only millionaire friends, but if you're hanging out with people who have very limiting beliefs about money, and who was like, oh my God, maybe you shouldn't start this business because, you might lose, and like, oh my God, it could be really hard and whatever, those people are going to hold you back, whether you want to realize it or not. But if you were to go to like millionaires and you were to tell them about this, project or business that you wanted to start, a lot of them would probably be like, yeah, like fucking do it, or like, have you thought of this? Like, probably empowering you and uplifting you. Obviously, unless they're like the jealous type and don't want anyone else to be rich and successful, but that's something else. But for the most part, if you approach somebody who's happy within themselves and successful in any way, whether that's with money or whether that's with parenting or whatever it is, then it's going to be easier for you to become like that too, because those people want you to win. Those people want you to be on that same path. They're succeeding for you, like they're rooting for you. They're like cheering you on, basically. So it's important to surround yourself with people who do that for you, who support you, who see that new version of who you want to be rather than who you were, who you have been. And surround yourself means also the information that you take in, whether that's, music. If you're trying to be more happy and more positive, then maybe stop listening to music that's all about, horrible things that are happening and negativity and all that stuff. And if you're trying to be, a more of a gentle parent, maybe read some books about parenting, just open up your mind, be open minded. That doesn't mean you have to read a book and listen to every single thing that that person's written in that book. No, it just means that you could be a little bit more open minded and maybe you can learn something from them. Maybe they give you an example on how to react in this situation when your child has not wanting to eat and is throwing the food on the floor, and compared to how you would usually react, getting angry and frustrated and, trying to force them to eat, they might give you another suggestion. I can't give you many suggestions because I'm not a parent, but, you know, broaden your broaden your information, broaden who you learn from as well, whether that's physical people or whether you're listening to books or reading or TV or anything like that. We only learn from learning. So if you're stuck in a certain way because you've been this certain way your whole life, you have to shift something within yourself so that you can learn to change, so that you can go in a different direction. Because if you're wanting to be different, but you're still surrounding yourself in all the same environment with all the same information and everything like that, then how are you going to change? How are you going to pivot your life and look at a different direction when you're kind of still looking back? I personally believe that, working on your spirituality, working on yourself, working on, your emotional intelligence and things like that, that's what's going to help you break this generational trauma that you might not have realized that you are still holding on to, because you're still a reaction to your environment rather than learning to be aware and present and respond rather than react. So therapy might be useful to you, but there are a lot of different ways that you can work through this. And I think it's all about finding what works for you, what makes you feel good, and just keep exploring your options. You might try something and it might suck and it might not work out, and that's fine. Just try something else. Just keep moving forward. As long as you are aware enough and that you are trying enough, that's all that really matters. I think the most important thing on any sort of healing path is just being present, learning to be fully present in the moment. Because in the present moment, you're not living in the past, you're not holding on to your depression or your anxiety and your anger from the past, and you're not anticipating the future. You're just present. So when a child, makes a mess or something like that happens, where something bad happens, you can kind of take a moment to pause and be in that present moment instead of being like, oh, I'm being so frustrated because my whole day has been stressful, blah, 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 blah. And now I'm going to react. You can kind of just be in that moment and just recognize what it is for what it is just then and there. Oh, there's just a mess on the floor that I've got to clean up. That's it. But if you're not living in the present moment and you're in your head a lot, then that one little mess might be like the tipping point for you because you've had such a long day and you've had all these things happen. So, learning to be in the present moment will help you. It will help you because it will teach you to respond rather than react. And that's why I say meditation is so powerful, because it helps slow you down. Because a lot of the times when we have a lot of trauma and we're trying to heal, it's because we're living in fight or flight. We're always in go, 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 and we never learned how to slow down and to just be present and actually slow down our nervous system so that we can relax and so that we can be aware and then so we can take a moment before we react. And just remember that, again, it takes time and it takes patience. So be kind to yourself while you're on this journey, because it's not easy and things will keep coming up. You will think that you've worked through something and then something else will trigger you. And it might seem like a never ending battle, but That's kind of just the journey of life that we're on. We're always evolving, we're always growing. There's always going to be something that you can go deeper within yourself for. So be kind and be patient to yourself. And remember that you're just still a little kid inside there. There's just like still a little kid inside you, and it's just learning. It's still trying to learn because unfortunately, you might not have been taught how to deal with your emotions, how to deal with all this stuff. So you kind of have to reparent yourself now. But change is possible. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in my next one. Blessings.